that what I will try to be doing is taking you through the application process of getting you to engage with Google. I just want to build upon what Peter was saying when he was talking about Google and why we should be engaging with Google. So my opening statement here is Google here, and you can see all of the logos and the applications just on this page here that Google is actually into already. Because I'm the typical person who loves to do the numbers, you'll see that Google Analytics is sitting there, and I use that almost every day, just analysing what's happening out on Google in relation to our platforms, and we can actually get to get an awful lot of information through that. Obviously, there's a whole range of other ones there that you probably have engaged with. YouTube is probably the biggest one. Street View is a brilliant move by Google. I think everyone has used Street View these days. Blogger, Talk, and of course there is the Google Play, which is all of the apps that they're now starting to bring into. Just going to take you through where the internet is sitting at present in a global view. This is, I find, a very good image. It's almost like a nightlife, you know, where the lights are on at night time. But this clearly shows you where the internet usage is actually happening, with the red obviously being pretty hot. Engagement for Australia is on the east coast of Australia, which makes sense. That's where the population is. But when you start to look at global, you can see Europe is heavy, you can see the USA is heavy, and India is heavy. Everything else is starting to come online. China and Southeast Asia is becoming heavy. Africa is almost like a blackout. And that is one of the places where we think that the next surge of the internet is going to happen. South America is following the population down the coastlines, etc. Google is engaging with around about 94% of all internet users. And 65% of Americans are getting hit every day with Google. So that's showing you the impact of Google. And you're saying, why are we engaging with Google? And the reason is because it is the #1 player in these platforms. And we have to go with the #1 player. But as Pete said, if it is a flexible environment, if another platform eventually overtakes Google, we've got to be prepared to pack our bags and move with that platform. But at present, in our short-term vision, we see Google still being the #1 player, and we can't see anyone else coming along and taking them out of the play. These are some of the Google products which you can actually find just by going onto Google and just keep on hitting the More button. You'll find it eventually on the menu. And it gets down into the areas where they actually have what they call Google Labs, and they are the places where they're actually experimenting without any support of trying out new things. I find them quite interesting in the Google Labs, and there are some here that are becoming quite interesting. One of the interesting ones are the video search. We're finding that video is becoming a lot more relevant in the engagement of teaching and learning, rather than the text space. Text space is great, but we think that the actual video can transmit an awful lot more information than the text, and we'll explain that throughout the course. You want to know why Google is #1? You can just go to their revenue sheet. This is in millions of dollars. So Q1 2014, that's not that long ago, Google made $15,000 million. So that's basically $15 billion just for that quarter. That's what they made. So obviously they've got a little bit of room to start keeping their #1 position. They've got a little bit of room to reinvest into their product. They've got a little bit of room to actually go and explore how they can remain the #1. So this is the graph, and the other interesting thing is it's actually growing in their revenue. So they're not actually stagnant or declining. They are actually growing, but it's actually the huge amount of money that's actually coming through Google. And that's why they are the #1, because they've got just so much money going through. We're finding that Google are actually starting to get into storage in the cloud, but you can also now have your mobile phone going through Google as well. And I've actually experimented with that with my Google Wallet. So if I've got $10 sitting in my Google Wallet at present, and I use my Google Wallet to make a phone call, and it is much cheaper than the Optus and Telstra phone calls. And I can dial anyone through my Google phone, through my Google Wallet, and all of a sudden Google is now infiltrating everything that I'm starting to do. And I'm actually allowing that to happen. And the reason why I can allow it to happen is because I've set up this front image, or my public image, and my public image is engaging with Google, whereas my private person is I'm trying to keep it a little bit away from the front of Google. The thing that we'll be engaging with tonight is Gmail, and the reason why I say Gmail, it's because that is the product that Google uses as the basis for everything in signing up in all of their products and engagement. By signing up as a Gmail, Google immediately, that second, knows who you are when you're actually engaging with any of their products. And I showed you all those products before, whereas if you keep on signing up with different email addresses, Google doesn't get to know who you are or how to engage with you. Because what Google's trying to do is that if you are doing some work on this section over here and you immediately swap to another platform, they can actually bring all the information across and actually integrate what's going on. And that's what we want to have, is a seamless integration across all of the platforms. Otherwise, you've got to keep on going, oh, what's this password? What's that password? I now have a one Google password, which actually I don't have to remember 100 passwords anymore, because Google now has got the one password for everything for me engaged.
Is it something for platforms that are linked to Google, or is it any?
I go with any platforms. Because what happens is that if you're engaging on Quora, for instance, which is a non-Google product, but you have your Gmail account, Google knows who you are on Quora by your Gmail account. Because when you are actually signing up, you'll sign up with your name, and sometimes it might be Philip or it might be Phil. And of course, Google sees that, oh, who's Philip and who's Phil? Oh, they might be two different people. But if I've got the same Gmail account, Google knows, oh, it doesn't matter what he calls himself, I can see that it is actually philip.basketball@gmail.com. So same email address, even though my usernames might be a different variation. We try not to have a variation, but in our exploration, going down dead ends, we've learned that in creating your usernames, you've got to try and keep it consistent. And that's one of the learnings that we've learned, and we're going to be sharing with you today, that you shouldn't do that. So here is my online professional name. Search these options from the top of your name. Existing network name. Does anyone already have 1,000 people engaging with you on the internet? Peter does. Is anyone else in that environment where you've actually got over 1,000 people? Because what we don't want to do is destroy your existing network. But if you don't have at least 1,000 people engaging with you, we want to build you from brand new. Some of you have probably got Hotmail accounts, some of you have probably got usernames that start with, you know, I'm the crazy person from Brisbane or something like that. Well, we're going to probably no longer use that in our professional persona. We're going to actually try to have your username and your as close as possible to your real name. My real name is philip.basketball. My Gmail account is philip.basketball@gmail.com. Now, I was very fortunate because I did that 5 years ago. And of course, of the other 15 Philip Basketballs in the world, they can't get that Gmail account. They have to come up with something else. So if you are the first time users coming onto Gmail, you might find that your real name has already been taken by your mirror person in the globe. And so what we do is we start to go with, okay, if you can't get your real name, we put our real names together. So Philip Basketball with no dot in between. If we can't get that, then we try and do something with a prefix like Dr. Philip Basketball. Or you try and do your short real name like Phil.Basketball. If you can't get Phil.Basketball, you might try and put an initial in like Philip.A for Andrew .Basketball. So it'd be Philip.A Basketball. If that can't work, I go philip.andrew.basketball. And when we get down to steps 8, 9, and 10, we're starting to really struggle. And in the end, we may actually have to put a number in there right at the end. Only because Google, with their Google Analytics, can actually differentiate the words from numbers. And so right at the end, we can actually put numbers in there. The reason why we don't want to put numbers in there, because I always say, what is the telephone test? In other words, if you've got a client on the other end and you have to give your email account to them across the telephone, can you say it easily across the telephone and they can get your email account? For me, it's philip.basketball@gmail.com, 1L for Philip. And that's all I have to say on the telephone, and I get around about a 99% success rate. Whereas if you come up with something like, philip.basketball101@gmail.com, you don't sound as professional when you've got those numbers in your Gmail account. So we try to not use the numbers until the very last. There are things that we will actually be doing is we'll actually be exploring your name online. We're trying to find who your competitors are. Obviously, if you've got a movie actor that's got exactly the same name as you, you're going to have trouble fighting for your name. If you've got politicians, sports stars, academic professors, law breakers, in other words criminals, or musicians, you're going to have a hard time trying to get your name. What we try to do is we then try and find out who is in your domain field with your name. For instance, Peter Basketball actually is a person in Canada who works in an educational institute who is actually a professor. So this Peter Basketball is actually fighting against another Peter Basketball who both of them are in educational spaces and they're constantly battling each other. But I think if you did a search on Peter Basketball, you'll probably find that this Peter Basketball gets more on page 1 than the other Peter Basketball. So you'll find that there are going to be some competitors at the end of the day, and it's a matter of determining whether or not the name you choose will in fact be the name that you can actually win. Remember, you're trying to get your name to be on page 1 of Google. We don't want to be on page 2, 3, or 4. As Pete said, we're all worried about Big Brother. Everyone hears about the government. Oh, the government's got too much information, or the banks have got too much information. Some people say, oh, Facebook's got too much information. Well, the real dark monster in the room is in fact Google. Google have so much information on you, it is incredible. Every time your fingers touch that keyboard, they know exactly what you are doing. They are tracking everything that you do by your fingers on that keyboard. They track that through your IP address, and they can keep it going forward. So the idea is that if you're worried about what Google are doing, well, it's too late. They already know everything about you, so why not go the other way and let's say, okay, instead of being never on the internet, if I'm going to be on the internet, let's go into what I call the open space rather than the secret space. Because in the open space, I'll share this story with you. I have gone and shared all my information with Google, but I've actually set it to private. Even though I've shared it with Google, no one can see all that information. One of the pieces of information that I share with Google is my telephone number. The other day, beep, 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 message. Hello, Phil. This is Google. We have blocked a user from Russia that has actually been logging on with you. Please confirm that you're not in Russia, otherwise do nothing, and so forth. Google will protect you because they know that I'm actually in Brisbane, Australia, and they know my habits, and they could actually pick who was actually hacking my account, and they actually set it up. They went on to go even further with that. They said, Phil, for extra security, we want you to do a 2-step verification process. And basically what they did is they sent me a PIN number. I had to reply within 30 minutes, that PIN number back to them, and they were able to verify it to me. And that was done because I shared my telephone number with them. And I've always been very, I don't want to share my telephone number with someone I don't know. but I've gone into this space where by sharing it's actually protecting me rather than not protecting me. Otherwise, if I didn't share that telephone number with Google, this person in Russia would have hacked in and they would have had a merry old time, and who knows what they could have got into. So there is protection in being very open. For instance, George Clooney, if I walked in and said, hey, I'm George Clooney, you'd all laugh. Whereas, you know who George Clooney is. You know what he looks like. His protection is in the fact that his face is very familiar. So it's good to be known. It's good to have your face out there so people can quickly check up on you. The other issue is trying to have your name. There are times when we say to you, maybe it's not wise to use your real name, and those can be in cases of, for instance, if you are in like domestic violence or having issues around those, well then we strongly advise you not to actually publicly go with your name. So be careful of that. We're not saying it's you must do this to actually engage. There are times when you actually should not release your name, especially if you've got those instances where you actually need protection from it being not known on the internet. So let's hope we're not in that. All right, we'll now go through to the actual application of Gmail.
Probably I should just check that